Welcome to True Talk on WMNF 88.5 with Ahmed and Samar. Today we're going to be speaking about the Biden's proposal for a ceasefire in Gaza, which seems like Israel is actually rejecting. So we're going to be speaking to Jarrah from Democracy in the Arab World Now to find out more about what's happening there, and also possibly take some of your phone calls. So a lot has been happening, and Samar is actually joining me shortly. She's connecting remotely. But so much has happened this past week, and we're actually continuing our coverage of Gaza. We've been doing so since October 7th, and it's crazy to think that it's been something like 8 months now that this war, which many people have called a genocide, including myself, Samar, also considers it a genocide, a form of ethnic cleansing. I don't know if you haven't reached the same conclusion, then you must not be paying attention. Something like 40,000 people, maybe 45,000 people have been killed. I'm going to get you a more, well, they don't have an accurate number because there's so many thousands of people are still under the rubble from the attacks. More than 15,000 children have been killed in Gaza. Israel claims that they're defending themselves, but this does not look like defense when you're killing and murdering so many innocent people. The ICJ, International Court of Justice, has issued an order for Israel to halt its Rafah operation. That was last week. Israel just has doubled down and continues to bomb Gaza. Same thing with the ICC, who said that they put in a request for arrest warrants for some of Israel's top leaders. And now the United States government, Congress, has responded by, or at least the House has issued a resolution to sanction them. So I'm going to have my co-host join now. Let me see if she's on. And Samar, welcome to True Talk. Thanks for joining us.
I only see your hair. You need to raise your, for those who can watch us live on Twitter, if Ahmed had put us on Twitter, I can see only Ahmed's dark hair. But good morning and welcome to True Talk.
Oh. Good morning, Samar. So, Samar, we're going to be speaking to, and I think there's some sort of echo right now. We're going to be speaking to Jarrah from Dawn a bit later, but you sent me a message saying that Israel rejected the ceasefire. I didn't see that yet.
I just saw that on Twitter, but I was checking like breaking news on CNN, breaking news on Reuters. Everybody is covering the D-Day events, so I saw it in the feed of a Palestinian journalist, and he wrote it in the English language. I'm trying to find if
you're trying to get confirmation of that. But throughout this week, since Biden has had that press conference or the address where he's laid out the phases of this ceasefire proposal, since then, actually right away, Netanyahu and other leaders within the cabinet have rejected it in a way, saying that things are not changing. They're going to continue to the war and to eliminate Hamas. So there's a lot of mixed signals, and we're trying to figure out exactly where this proposal stands. And this is a very similar proposal, if not identical, to what either Hamas has proposed before and Israel rejected, or actually something that Hamas has accepted and Israel rejected. So it's identical to what Israel has rejected in the past, but Biden is now pushing. And throughout this whole week, there's this pressure to call on people to tell Hamas to accept the deal, as if that's who's the obstacle for it. Is that what you're also hearing and learning?
Yes, Ahmed, it's like a recycling, and it's not a perfect proposal, but I am hoping that Raed can talk about that. But there is actually, I want to really mention, Ahmed, a report that came out just a few hours ago from the New York Times, and it talks about this Israeli prison or base camp and about torture. And there are eyewitnesses report. CNN was covering it, or I think the one that broke the story, and then New York Times, and then they say that they sodomized men who were in Gaza, and they use like electric something, and they make them sit on it. And then one guy died. One Palestinian died from being electrocuted, and then several people are in the hospital because of beatings. And as always, the IDF says that they are investigating. But this is just published a couple of hours ago on the New York Times about sodomizing of Palestinian hostages and people that they arrested randomly while they were in Gaza. Some of them are older men, like there won't be fighters. But unfortunately, I think from what we have seen yesterday, the Jerusalem Day, the so-called Jerusalem Day, and the slogans and the things. I wish our media would cover these things, Ahmed. Death to the Arabs, hope your villages will be burned, hope you will all be wiped out, while they're marching supposedly in a religious holy place, cursing other people, wishing them death and wishing them genocide. So obviously there is something wrong with a lot of people in that part of the world, in Israel, where young people, really, in 15 years old, some of them look like nine years old. There is damage control happening on Twitter at the moment, trying to claim, this journalist were hundreds of people ganged on.
Right. There was a photo, like a very specific photo that everybody was sharing on social media of one Palestinian journalist surrounded by hundreds of Israelis that were beating him, throwing things, and he was all alone, trapped in a corner. And many people remarked that this is like basically a description, a snapshot of what's happening throughout Palestine and the West Bank, but in Gaza, and well, specifically in the West Bank, the attack on journalism and this just hatred that you can see relayed in this image. But the Western media outlets and in the United States, they're not carrying that image.
No, thank God we have Twitter and some social media. But there was this lady saying, but you did not see what happened before that. Before that, there were tweets for this guy. So like these students or these young people, before they hit him, they went to his Twitter feed and figured out his name and figured out who he is, and then figured out, translated his tweets in Arabic and realized that they are pro this or pro that. So it's ridiculous what they try to justify. But what is scary, Ahmed, is that they look so young. They're 9 years old. 11 years old. Who's being?
I saw a lot of them that look 20-something and teenagers.
If you go enlarge the photo,
yeah,
you will find a lot of very, very young people. So remember when they keep saying who radicalized the Muslims?
Right. No, I saw in the images also parents bringing their babies and children in strollers and going throughout the march and heckling and throwing things at Palestinians. Imagine they're going through the Palestinian quarters. So Jerusalem, for centuries, was in Palestinian hands and Muslims, run by Muslims and Christians. And then even after the partition by the United Nations in 1948, when Israel declared their independence or taking over and saying that they exist, they did not have claims to Jerusalem. It wasn't until 1967 that they invaded Jerusalem and occupied it and have occupied it since then. And now and even then, they've left the eastern Jerusalem, where the Palestinians are predominantly, and they've occupied western Jerusalem. But in this situation, on this Jerusalem day, the Israeli military and police go in, and it's mandatory for all Palestinians to remain inside and not go out in their own communities or neighborhoods, shut down their shops and they can't be outside. And during that time, on this day, this Jerusalem day, Israelis are permitted to go and march through the Palestinian quarters, through their neighborhoods, through their streets. And many times it turns into violence and attacks on these Palestinians. And basically, it's like a police patrol. They're protected by the police. And when things get out of hand, sometimes they intervene and tell them to move on. But there was so much vile hatred that was on display yesterday, including chants and graffiti and vandalism and attacking people. And this image of this journalist was circulating everywhere. What was his name?
Something Al-Qawasmi.
Al-Qawasmi, correct. So we're waiting for our guests to join us. So much is happening. Samar, we're actually thinking about pre-recording this show yesterday with our guest because the timing was a little bit better. However, because the situation is so fluid, and we're going to talk about the ceasefire proposal, but Samar and I were worried and concerned that things are changing so rapidly that by the time our show airs today, that there may be some sort of an announcement that a ceasefire took place. So we're doing the show live. We're going to take some of your phone calls possibly later if we have time. But Samar, I want to thank our listeners and supporters for coming through for us last week, where they stepped up big time. And contributed to the show. As you know, our show is listener supported. Our station is listener supported. And we actually exceeded our goal, Samar. So congratulations to you. And thank you so much to our listeners. And I think our guest is joining us. So we're going to...
Actually, as you speak, I'm looking at the Twitter feed and I can't even figure out. Maybe Ra'ed knows the latest, because... very mixed messages. Like now it says Hamas response to ceasefire proposal sparks uncertainty. International calls accept the proposal were highlighted. It says the situation remains unclear as conflicting reports continue to emerge from both sides, Ahmed. As we speak, I am looking at the news feed, and I can't figure out really what is the latest. That's interesting. Maybe the news are busy with the D-Day events. I'm trying to figure out what is going on. Did you find anything, Ahmed? Or your last minute, as usual?
No, I did not find it. I mean, you're not finding anything, so I'm also not going to find anything. Is there any relations to you and our guest? Because I think you have similar last names.
Jarrah. He is Jarrah.
Oh, Jarrah. That's right. Yes.
Okay, there's a huge difference between Jarrah and
what is the difference? Because they sound the same. One is a surgeon and one is?
Jarrah, somebody who pulls something. جر من جرة أو جرة يجر جرا.
Okay.
It's a huge difference. There is A-R, his last Jarrar. And I think it's an Iraqi name. So anyways, if you're just joining us, this is True Talk on WMNF 88.5 FM. My co-host and I are hoping to be talking to Ra'ed Jarrah, who is the Arab American political analyst and advocate. He's also advocacy director of DAWN, which is an organization in Washington, D.C. that promotes democracy and human rights in the Middle East area and magnifies the voices of exiles and experts. And I don't know, Ahmed, if you know this or not, but DAWN was founded by the late Jamal Khashoggi, who was brutally assassinated in Turkey. He is, of course, Saudi and had alien card. He was not an American citizen.
You mean a residency card? He was not an alien.
Yeah, that's what they call it, alien card.
Okay. So, well, it's called resident alien. Is it an alien card? It's a green card.
Yeah.
He was a U.S. resident who was killed there. We've covered it plenty on our show, but we're now going live with Jarrah from Dawn, who is now joining us from Washington, D.C. I presume. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ahmed, and thank you, Samar.
Good to see you, Jarrah. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while. I haven't talked to you for a while. And Ahmed, I think we crossed paths like a long time ago. We worked together on Egypt issues.
Yes, we did. And we also, I think last time I might have seen you at a conference in Miami, maybe, or wasn't sure if you were there. Human rights issues that we've worked on in the past.
It's the same bubble. It's good to see you both.
Yes, but it's been years. Welcome to back on our show. I think you haven't been on for a while. A lot has been happening. Samar and I are trying to figure out what's happening with the Biden proposal. Can you give us some background on that? It seems really identical to what was proposed and accepted before by Hamas. Why is he proposing it, and what's the status of it?
Yeah. I mean, I will talk about that a little bit, but first I want to comment quickly about my last name because I
clarify it for us. What does Jarrah mean?
I'm a Palestinian American, so Jarrah is a large family from Jenin in the West Bank, and the name comes from like the roots of the family. Jarrah means like a large army, Jayshun Jarrah, like a large army that was created by the family. So. Some interesting history there that has to do with fighting Napoleon in the few centuries ago. But as a Palestinian American, I think like watching the news from here always like hits different. Like I think Samar, like me and you have like a very different way in handling these news and updates about the genocide. Is it going to stop? Is it not going to stop? Is there a ceasefire? There is no ceasefire. And I think some of it is deliberate confusion, like what you were doing a few minutes ago. I think many of us are staring at our screens thinking, scratching our heads, what is going on? Is there a ceasefire or is there no ceasefire? The matter, like the fact of the matter is that the U.S. is trying to portray or create this narrative where Israel has, quote unquote, accepted the ceasefire and the Palestinians have not.
Mm-hmm.
I actually don't think that's factually accurate because on the one hand, the Israeli government keeps saying that they have not accepted the ceasefire. The Prime Minister has said that his government is in shambles, because of the details of the ceasefire. They're saying they're going to withdraw from being ministers, the government will collapse. Netanyahu is saying he doesn't believe. So on the one hand. On the other hand, the terms that were announced by Biden are more or less the exact same terms that were announced by Palestinian factions last month when Palestinians and the US and Qatar and Egypt agreed to a ceasefire that was rejected by Israel. So I feel like the narrative is actually not very accurate. I haven't heard an official position come from Palestinian factions yet. Now there are some rumors about what's going on, accepting, not accepting, but I did see an early draft of a UN Security Council resolution that adopts the ceasefire language. That resolution claims that Israel has accepted the ceasefire and that it calls on Palestinians to accept the ceasefire. So that's the last thing I saw. I think, this week we will have to find an answer. Like Palestinians have to give an official statement on their position about the ceasefire arrangement. And then that will make everything clear. Like where we stand now, there is some confusion because President Biden takes it upon himself to announce to the world on Friday, after Shabbat, which he's never done that before. No U.S. presidents have spoken on behalf of Israeli governments before, especially when it comes to making an announcement on a Friday night during Shabbat. And Prime Minister Netanyahu actually issues a counter statement on Saturday during the day, the first time in his prime ministership history to issue a statement during Shabbat, during Saturday, contradicting President Biden's announcement about Israel accepting a ceasefire. So there is definitely like a backstory there. Like Biden is trying to corner Israel into opposition by
preempt Netanyahu.
Yeah, preempt him, like put him in a place. Maybe Biden did give Netanyahu an ultimatum behind closed doors. Maybe Biden's red line, threats were conveyed to Israel. Maybe there's a backstory there. What we know as a fact that there is very serious division between the United States and Israel, unprecedented division between the United States and Israel. And I don't think it comes from like an ethical place. I don't think President Biden is necessarily worried about killing Palestinians, or it doesn't come from there. It comes from domestic politics, electoral politics, self-preservation for President Biden here in the U.S., and the fact that the Biden administration is falling apart, resignation after resignation, staff pressure, political appointees disagreeing with him and what's going on. And it's a lot. Like he's dealing with a lot of domestic pressure in the United States. And I think, everything that's going on campuses, everything that's going on in the streets, there is a lot going on. Public opinion polls in the United States, the movement, the grassroots movement, everything that's happening, including this very interview, like the fact that we are pushing very hard for an end to genocide, pushing very hard for an end to the blank check policy with Israel. It is creating unprecedented pressure in this country. So that's what we know. What we know as a fact is that there is division between Biden and Netanyahu, that Biden is pushing for a ceasefire finally after 7 or 8 months of avoiding to say ceasefire. That's what we know as a fact.
Yeah, this is where, but this is where some people in the Arab world and some analysts say, are we sure this is about a ceasefire? So maybe before we talk about that, it's like 3 phases, this peace proposal or the ceasefire. Can you maybe just briefly tell us the 3 different phases, and then we're going to go from there, because people have different even ways of understanding it. It's sometimes vague.
That's right.
Open to discussion.
Yeah, the 3 phases have been proposed before. We read the exact same outline. I think each phase takes around 40 days. The first phase includes withdrawal of Israeli forces from city centers and population areas in Gaza, and in return, Palestinians would release civilian hostages from their control. It also includes flow of humanitarian aid and other important provisions to sustain life in Gaza. The second phase includes the beginning of the release of some political prisoners. Some military prisoners of war, like soldiers from Palestinian side, and then some highly political prisoners inside of Israeli prisons. And the third phase is the final one, which discusses, like the release, like the final, coordinations about reconstruction, humanitarian aid, and the release of the remainder of prisoners and hostages on all sides. So, that's like the outline of it. And it also includes a complete withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza. It also
from residential areas.
No, the first phase is from the residential areas. The second phase is from the entirety of Gaza.
Okay.
And I think the other important part that Palestinians really fought for is that Palestinians will gain the right to return to north, to their destroyed areas, because that's something that was a fundamental part of Israel's genocide plan and ethnic cleansing, is to move Palestinians south and not allow them to move back north to their homes. So that is happening during phase 1 and phase 2. Now, I think there was the disagreement about using the word ceasefire or sustained sustained, calm or whatever. And like there are like different words that are being used. I think Palestinians are pushing for a longer cessation of hostilities. Netanyahu is saying that he will not promise any cessation of hostilities that is permanent. I think some of these things are like meaningless because like there has never been like a permanent ceasefire between Palestinians and Israelis. Like there's always like temporary ceasefires, lacking like a solution, like an actual like announcement of a one state or two state solution, like a big treaty to resolve what's going on, the situation in Israel and Palestine, and end the occupation and the apartheid and genocide. Lacking that, I don't know whether using a word like ceasefire or the word as sustained calm makes any difference. Really, it's not the difference between words. It's the difference between the unsustainable situation that Palestinians are put under. So I mean that remains to be figured out. I think there was something that flew under many people's radars in the past few months, where all Palestinian factions, including Hamas, announced that they're calling for a two-state solution. This happened before, like Hamas did accept the Arab Peace Initiative that was proposed by Saudi Arabia back in 2002, which happened under similar circumstances to what we're saying now, not as severe, but there was a brutal Israeli attack on my hometown of Jenin, and at the heels of that attack, Arab states led by Saudi Arabia proposed the Arab initiative that is based on a two-state solution, where Israel withdraws to the borders of 1967 and Palestine declares a state on those lands. And Hamas at the time, did not oppose it, and at one point they actually announced that they accepted it. So it's not very new, but I think the renewed announcement of Hamas's acceptance to this, other Palestinian factions accepting the declaration of a Palestinian state on the border of 1967 is a big announcement. It was actually very surprising to us here in the US because the political debate in the United States has moved far away from a two-state solution framework. Most organizations that I know don't even talk about two-state solutions. Is a joke at this point. So it was surprising to see that is something coming from the Palestinian side. But I'm saying there is like a path there to like a larger sustained solution that would, reach to like what we would call like a peace treaty or something. But I don't think that this particular three-phase goes as far as achieving that. And I doubt that, I think it's not reasonable for anyone, whether it's from the Palestinian or the Israeli side, to think about the ceasefire agreement as an agreement that will end, the 75-year occupation and apartheid and genocide. It's not going to happen through this negotiated agreement. I think this is a transitional agreement. And that is what phase 3 includes now, is that there will be engagement in negotiations for a sustained permanent solution to what's going on in Israel-Palestine. So that's the vision. I mean, I think, what we have to wait now is for official announcements because Israel is not making an official announcement. They're tiptoeing around the decision. I have not heard an official announcement come from the Palestinian side yet. So there will be an official announcement that will come from heads of organizations, not just from media leaks. Oh, Hamas says yes. Oh, Hamas says no. That's not something that will be tweeted.
Do you think they're waiting for the festivities of D-Day to finish because the whole universe is looking at it and following it? I tried to go to all the breaking news stations and nothing, except some people on Twitter are saying, I read some Palestinian journalists saying that Israel rejected the proposal, but I could not.
I saw that. Yeah, I mean, I saw some stuff about that, but it's not very accurate. Israel is doing this confusing messaging. Yes, we accept. No, we don't accept. Or we accept with conditions. Or yes, we accept, but we're not going to actually promise a permanent ceasefire. We have to destroy Hamas. And that's kind of funny because then what is the ceasefire? That's not what President Biden is saying. So there is some confusion coming from there. But here's what I want to tell you. If the Security Council resolution passes, the Security Council resolution mentions that Israel has accepted the terms of the Security Council resolution, and it mentions that in paragraph 2 and 3, like in detail, all the 3 phases, etc., withdrawal, everything that I just talked about now. So if after the Security Council resolution is announced, there is an official announcement by Palestinian factions saying we accept the ceasefire, I think it would be very difficult for Israel to say, actually, we don't accept it after the Security Council has voted on it. So if I had to guess, I would say maybe there is some strategic reason to wait because of the impending Security Council resolution. Maybe there are other internal, conversations that are happening. I know this is not a situation that one Palestinian group that will make a final decision about by itself. This is definitely a situation that other groups outside of Hamas will be involved in. I'm sure there are internal conversations going on there. So I'm not privy to any of these. I don't think anyone is. But what we know as a fact is that there hasn't been a final and official announcement from the Palestinian side.
Can anyone veto this resolution, you think?
I mean, definitely no one will veto it because the U.S. is the source of vetoes. One time there was a veto from Russia or China because they thought a resolution was too lopsided against Palestinians, that it was too pro-Israeli, too pro-American. I don't think that's the view now. Like what people see is that this is a watershed moment where President Biden has moved the United States policy from saying we're not going to interfere, we're not going to call for a ceasefire, to them leading the effort to mandate a ceasefire. So I don't think there will be a veto from the other P5.
Ahmed, my co-host, are you still there? I don't know if Ahmed has difficulty with his mic, but let me just reintroduce Ahmed, I can't hear you.
Yes, Raed and Samar, I'm here. Raed, thanks for joining us. You actually are working with Dawn Minna or Dawn Organization. What can you tell us about what Dawn is doing? And a little bit of background about
that. Dawn is an organization that was founded by the late Jamal Khashoggi, as Samar mentioned earlier. And we operate in a few cities in the United States. I'm based in D.C. We have our headquarters and staff in New York. We have a few folks around the country as well. Our main mission is to advocate for changing the United States policy when it comes to engaging with the Middle East and North Africa. And by changing, I don't mean invading any of these countries, and I don't mean helping people understand what democracy is or interfering in their business. Our vision is that the United States is a part of the problem in the Middle East and North Africa, either by direct interventions or by supporting apartheid regimes and abusive governments in the region, whether it is Israel or Saudi Arabia or the UAE or the dictatorship in Egypt or other abusive governments there. So we try to pressure the United States government to end its blank check policies with these countries and sending military aid and sending assistance or selling weapons to these governments. And legitimizing them. And that would be an important step to get out of the way and allow for, populations in the Middle East and North Africa to work towards a more democratic institutions in their countries. So that's where our bigger theory of change. We are engaged in many of the countries there. Of course, since last October, a lot of our attention has been redirected towards the situation in Israel-Palestine. We have a team of dedicated researchers and advocates working specifically on what's going on in Gaza, on exposing Israeli crimes and calling the U.S. government to stop its complicity with the genocide.
What do you think that the goal of Israel is in Gaza?
I mean, this is not something that it's not my theory. I think based on what they have been saying, the leaked memos from the Israeli Ministry of Strategic Planning, the Prime Minister's decisions, is to completely destroy Gaza and push Palestinians out of Gaza. And that was the plan. And we saw that in action, pushing Palestinians to the south and trying to pressure Egypt to open its borders to receive Palestinians. We saw in action, like Israelis connected to this government, call to, re-establish settlements in Gaza, keep military presence in Gaza. So it's a plan of ethnic cleansing and occupation and taking over Palestinian land and killing Palestinians and or pushing them outside of Gaza, similar to what Israel has done in 1948, since 1948. It's another continuation of the Nakba. So it's nothing new. It's not a conspiracy theory that Israel would think or conduct a campaign to ethnically cleanse land and steal the land and kill the people and push them out to other countries. That's exactly the story of that state.
Meanwhile, Israel is saying that they're defending themselves. They're trying to eradicate Hamas. Is there any... I mean, it's so obvious, but in Washington, where you are, and the American mainstream media seems to buy that line that Israel somehow going after Hamas and they have a right to defend themselves.
I honestly don't think that the U.S. media believes that anymore. Maybe they repeated Israel's talking points in the first few weeks, few months, but I don't really see it happening a lot now. I haven't really heard that talking point coming from the White House either lately, because the level of atrocities and the length of the attack has far exceeded anything that was expected from this side. But I'll give you like a straight answer to that. Israel, like any other state, does have a right to defend itself. But that right is very limited and qualified. Under international law, the right to defend yourself is, number one, proportionate, and number two, has limited time, so it's immediate. And number three, it doesn't give you like a blank check to go, kill civilians. It has to happen within the rules of the IHL, like proportionality and distinction. In the case of what Israel did now, it far exceeded that. International law gives states a small leeway to defend itself until the UN Security Council has looked into the issue to step in and take the right measures. So it's a temporary, stopgap measure to defend yourself until the international mechanisms can step in to resolve that. So what's happening now far exceeds what international law would give Israel. And like the timing is outside the scope of that. And of course, there is nothing as waging a genocide campaign and killing tens of thousands of people to defend yourself. The ruling from the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, it actually goes so far to counter that argument about self-defense, because now we have a ruling, an actual ruling from the highest court in the world, ordering Israel to stop its attack on Rafah, ordering Israel to stop a lot of their activities in Gaza. So, like in the international law, there are like two different of rules. I don't want to go too far into the legality of it, but there are rules that allows you to go to war, and there are rules on how to conduct war. And Israel has been violating both. They're violating the rules of going to war, the legality of actually attacking Rafah now. That is illegal. Even if Israel is conducting that in an ethical way, it's still illegal, because the rule to go to war, the use ad bellum, that is now banned. The international court said, no, you can't attack Rafah. The other one is the use in bello. How do you conduct the war with proportionality and distinction? That's only if you have the right to wage war. Israel has lost that. So that's the first part of my question. The other quick part I want to say, Ahmed, is that ironically, the part that is actually very clear under international law that Israel does not recognize is the right of occupied populations to armed resistance. That is an actual right. Israel says we don't recognize this because it's in the additional protocols of the Geneva Conventions that we did not opt into it. Most international scholars say we don't expect you to opt into rights of occupied, and this is law.
So if that's something that's allowed by international law, why doesn't the world, I guess, international countries recognize Palestinians' right to, or do they? Because they seem to say that it's justified.
They do. We had very clear statements from China, from other international powers.
Correct. Yeah, from China, they said that, but European countries and others have not gone that far.
They haven't gone that far, but I think they know that is an issue, and they have been keeping that into consideration in their bigger things. Now, I would say, like, from our perspective here, as political organizations in the U.S. who are calling for cessation of hostilities and end of genocide, we're not actually fighting for Palestinians' right to self-defense or using arms. That's not something that is a part of the debate in DC. But I was just putting it there as an ironic, addition to these claims that Israel makes it as if they have an unqualified, unlimited right to go bomb Palestinians, and that's not true. That right does not exist, and the right that does actually exist is the opposite right of Palestinians to have.
So that's the irony that's in place, that they're actually, taking a position. But is there a right to self-defense against a population you occupy? I mean, if you're occupying a people, or you are in control of the, like, for example, does the United States military have the right to defend itself against its own people? Or is that, can you go to war against, can the U.S. launch a war against, for example, Tampa or Oklahoma City and, bombard the whole place with their weapons?
That is a nuanced question that does not have a direct answer. And, the fact that Gaza is an occupied territory by Israel, but the level of violence, like the hostilities level that happened on October 7th, before that, it does arise to a level of an armed conflict. So it is an internal, domestic armed conflict that happens there. Does a state have the right to send its army against its own people or occupied people? That is actually something that is not very, very, very clear under international law. There are people who say yes, people who say no, but all the experts agree that the right to self-defense is limited in scope and in time. And what Israel is doing now is completely outside of the possibility of anything that anyone would agree to when it comes to right of self-defense, in case we agree that Israel even has that right of self-defense, right?
You're right.
But I'm saying, like, whether or not it has it is a moot point at this point. Maybe we'd have had this conversation, the week after October 7th.
Right,
but
7
months after it, I think it's a moot point.
Something that's not a moot point is the role of neighboring Arab countries in this. It seems like Israel would not be able to get away with what it's doing if it wasn't for some sort of cooperation or collaboration, or I don't know, an inaction by neighboring Arab countries. Can you just go through what's Egypt's role, Saudi's role, Jordan's role, and are they, I guess, collaborating with the Israelis on this? Egypt does share a border with Gaza, which is Rafah, and aid has not been getting in, and now it seems like Israel has taken over the entire border completely and nothing can get through. So can you what's going on with neighboring Arab countries who Israel for a long time, or continues, and in Washington they continue to say that Israel is surrounded by all these enemy states?
Well, I will answer this question, and I have to actually hop off the call because I have another interview, Ahmed, so I would love to come to the show one more time soon to dig deeper into some of these issues. I agree with you that many Arab governments in the region have been complicit in Israel's crimes, and Israel would not have been able to conduct a lot of their crimes without the support of these neighboring Arab countries. And we saw that this is not something that I'm saying by myself. We saw tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of people demonstrate in neighboring countries, including Egypt and Jordan, against their own governments, accusing them of complicity with the genocide and starvation against the Palestinian people. So these governments know exactly what they're doing, and they're under immense pressure by their own people. In the case of Egypt, the Egyptian government has been blocking the entire border with Gaza. There's a massive border between Egypt and Gaza. And they could have and should have, and they are still able to open any point of that border, not just the Rafah crossing. It's a long fence, You can open it at any minute. As we speak, they can send a bulldozer and make a hole in that wall and then get food to the millions of starving Palestinians. No, there is nothing preventing them. It's sovereign Egyptian territory that goes for miles and miles and miles and miles from the Mediterranean until you get to the Rafah checkpoint that was taken over by Israelis. Israelis would not have been able to take that checkpoint without coordination with the Egyptians, by the way. And there are documented news. This is not a conspiracy theory. Documented news about the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu himself meeting with the IMF, asking them to give Egypt more money in exchange to political favors from Egypt about the situation in Gaza. So we saw $8 billion with a B, $8 billion go from the IMF to Egypt, unprecedented amounts of money. The same week, Israel's right hand in the region, their lackey, the UAE government, the United Arab Emirates, they reached out to Egypt. The same week where the $8 billion arrived to Egypt, they reached out and they invested somewhere between $24 and $30 billion in Egypt. So there are a lot of question marks of these massive payouts happening. What is Egypt giving to Israel in return? The collaboration to continue the starvation and genocide there. The satellite pictures of Egypt constructing large areas that could fit tens of thousands of refugees a few miles away from the border, including a prison, including like a camp. All of these are very, very big questions. Why is Egypt building these? How far is Egypt going to be complicit with the ethnic cleansing and genocide? So I have to stop here and jump on my other interview. Ahmed, I appreciate your time today. I would love to come back to the show very, very soon.
Yes, Ra'ed. Go ahead, Samar. Ra'ed, Samar has something to say.
I just want to thank you, Ra'ed, for being on True Talk. He's Arab-American political analyst and advocate, and he's an advocacy director with Dawn.
How can they find more about Dawn?
Yeah, I encourage everyone to visit our website, dawnmena.org. We're also very active on social media.
Dawn, MENA.org, and you can get the latest updates. Thanks for joining us, Ra'ed Jarrah, and hope to have you back on with us. I think Samar, you confused or we confused Ra'ed Jarrah being Iraqi because he's born in Iraq. I think his bio said, I forgot to ask him, but he was actually Palestinian American.
Maybe his mom. I remember I did an interview with him. Remember how I met him? Maybe soon after September 11, or how we got to know about Ra'ed. He was wearing a T-shirt that has Arabic writing on it.
Yeah, right. Was it? And then he got arrested, or he got thrown off a plane?
Yeah, and that was after September 11. And I don't know what the writing was, non-political, but it was in Arabic. And somebody said,
"We won't be silent," or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
In Arabic, "Lan nasmat."
And we will not be. Yeah, we will not be silent.
It's interesting how certain things stand out in your mind. Like I just remember the phrase, but I didn't remember who was wearing the T-shirt, but I remember there was a T-shirt. Today I'm wearing my WMNF T-shirt. Wake up, play WMNF, repeat, which we did from a fund drive some time back. Thanks again for our listener supporters who supported our show and helped us exceed our goal. Samar, it's tragic what we're hearing and seeing out of Gaza, the continuing death and destruction just overnight. And now it's even being reported in the New York Times, Washington Post, that Israeli strikes on a school killed dozens of innocent people that are sheltering there. And in the comments, you still have people coming on and saying, what were they teaching in the school? There's no teaching going on. People are just sheltering. The whole place has been destroyed. What are you talking about? It's amazing the amount of vitriol and hatred that people have been taught, to hate about Palestinian people, about Palestinians, Arabs, Muslims, the whole region. And a lot of it, I think, also happens to be manufactured. online, because now this week we also learned about this investigative report that Israel had paid the Israeli military or their PR operation for all these fake accounts that were tweeting and specifically targeting elected officials with fake news, specifically Democrats, African American or Black elected Democrats in Washington, including the leader of the Democrats in the House, Hakeem Jeffries. And some people are questioning, why were they specifically targeting Black people? Because they're likely more sympathetic with the Palestinian cause.
But Ahmed, not Hakeem Jeffries. I mean, he is up in arms supporting.
Right, but even him, he was targeted.
Why this money? $2 million.
Because even they spent, I think, over $2 million on these fake accounts and retweeting fake articles, going to they set up all these fake websites just to make it appear that it's like, real news. Similar operation to what people were accusing the Russians of doing when they're meddling within our elections. However, you see silence in Washington. And the State Department was asked because I think a few months ago, the United States sanctioned Russia for similar tactics. And the State Department spokesperson was asked, well, are you going to do the same to Israel to sanction them for having this operation? He said, well, this is just a report for now. We're still looking into it. Everything that's brought up to the State Department, and especially the spokesperson, they either say, well, that we are concerned about it, or we're still looking into it.
Yeah, we haven't seen the video. We haven't seen the footage. We haven't seen anything. But Ahmed, there is a very disturbing news. Actually, it was posted now by Mohammed al-Baradei, who is originally an Egyptian, and I think he used to be with
the Atomic Energy Agency of the UN.
So he's posting this report by FAO, which is a food administration organization by World Food Program. Over 1 million people, and I'm quoting here, over 1 million people, half the population of Gaza Strip, is expected to face death and starvation by mid-July. So
just in a month, like in 6 weeks.
Yeah. So
a million people are going to face death and starvation and death, or death due to starvation?
Yes, this is, to face death and starvation by mid-July, because you have water shortage and whatever water you have is contaminated. And it's the summer now, and there is a lot of mosquitoes and flies and diseases.
It's so disturbing, and just it makes my stomach turn to
This is why there is delay, Ahmed, in answering Biden.
Right. I think these are all stall tactics. Like, these are tactics to stall things, to allow more death and destruction. This has been going on since October. To continue this, they're using the events of October 7th as a pretext to just cause more death and destruction. And now you have a record number of Palestinians that have been displaced, over 1.8 million, 70%, if not more, of Gaza's infrastructure has been completely decimated. You have something like 2 million people living in tents and outdoor without access to water or healthcare. All the hospitals bombed and destroyed. If this is not textbook genocide and ethnic cleansing, I don't know what is. And in the meantime, our government here in the United States continues to provide this type of political cover for this genocide that's going on. Every time you bring them and show them real evidence of things, they say, oh, that's concerning. We're looking into it. It's unbelievable. And it's so frustrating that our tax money is going to fund this genocide. And if you're seeing this person that's Frank in the background, our producer coming in, because we're running out of time. It's his birthday?
It was his birthday last week.
Oh, that's why he didn't come in.
Yeah.
He's telling me that the Scoop, our news show, is going to be on next. Normally it's NPR, but now on Thursdays at noon or at 1 o'clock, it's the Scoop that comes on. We have to stay vigilant. All eyes are on Rafah. There's a huge mobilization effort in Washington, D.C. this weekend, where protesters from around the country are going to descend on Washington, D.C. to surround the White House to add more pressure on Biden. Wake up, Biden. Stop this genocide. Stop the displacement and ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. And we can't just see what's happening and just look the other way and pretend it's not happening. It's happening. It's being live streamed. And it's just unacceptable that in this day and age, that something like this would happen, when people said never again after things like the Holocaust. But it is happening again, and it's happening in front of our eyes. At least back then, people didn't know in real time what was happening. Right now, we know hour by hour, minute by minute, what is happening. This is WMNF Tampa. Scoop News is next. Take care and have a great weekend.